Trading cards have witnessed an ebb and flow to their popularity over the last 100 years or so, but the late 1980s and into the 90s mark a period when they were enjoying the spotlight. This is the EPS podcast, and you're listening to the 7th short episode of Season 2. While sports fans have had their niche carved out, with the 4 major North American sports represented in card form for a very long while, making a series of cards became standard with any mass marketing blitz starting somewhere in the late 1970s. Any movie, TV show, musical act, comic book, or toy line that had even the remotest chance of entering popular culture had to have a set of cards. The New Kids on the Block were marketed in such a way, which is interesting considering their target audience, preteen and teenage girls, were not as well represented in the trading card market as their male counterparts. Perhaps that's why New Kids trading cards and comic books were added to the merchandise bonanza, along with dolls, apparel, posters, buttons, and magazines. Take a listen to how the appearance of these cards at one of my EPS Live podcast exhibits evoked some great memories for my impromptu guest.
So I am here at Strawberry Bank Museum in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and I'm talking to Heidi and... Oh, somebody made a noise as soon as you said your name. Logan, like the airport. And you're from Boston, right? So it kind of works out. And you are visiting here just for today to the museum itself,
yes,
or touring around Portsmouth? And
Yep, just for today. We're up in Wells, Maine, staying.
Nice. Wells is a really nice town, and it's right there on the seacoast. But from my table, I brought in today a stack of, and actually there's a lot more in that box behind you, but a stack of New Kids on the Block trading cards. And that inspired you because we're not going to necessarily talk about the cards. I mean, there's no shortage of New Kids on the Block memorabilia from the late 80s, early 90s. I mean, it's endless. You want to talk about the group itself. And the question that you chose, and because you're from Boston, this is, is where was it made and what locations are associated with it? So tell me why this one leapt out at you from the table.
Okay. Well, when I was young, I had no idea that this was somebody from New Kids on the Block. At the time, obviously, he was just a little kid. He's a couple of years younger than me, Joey McIntyre. And I found out years later that I actually was in a theater class with him when we were kids. And I believe that it was put on by his mom. And it was at the Footlight Theater in Jamaica Plain, Massachusetts. And I just remember this little kid and a bunch of other kids, obviously, but this little kid and his mom. And they were teaching us all kinds of theater interaction, how to become, I guess, one with acting. So it was quite interesting. And that was one of my earliest memories. So that's how I knew that I grew up with Joey McIntyre, but I didn't know him that well.
That's so funny. And it's so cool. I mean, Boston is probably one of the most authentic, unique cities in the country because of how long it's been around and how rapidly it grew into the big city. I mean, even in the colonial era, it was like one of the busiest cities in the entire British Empire. And then fast forward to the modern age, and it's all these. I mean, it's such a unique city. I mean, it's not like New York where it's all laid out in a grid system. It's a collection of smaller neighborhoods and smaller towns like Jamaica Plain and Brookline and go all around and so it seems like it's really not the place. And I'm probably going to get lots of feedback on this, but you don't usually associate it with pop music. It doesn't quite have, especially by the time you get to the 80s and 90s, you think of like LA,
right,
or
New York.
Yeah, New York, or really any other. Like it's not quite the music city, but the New Kids on the Block are not quite the same kind of group as like a rock band necessarily.
One of the first boy bands, right?
Yeah, they kind of brought that style, and so you're talking about theatrics. Their stage show did involve a lot of that, didn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't just them singing and standing still in a microphone. They were dancing and jumping around, and choreography was a big part of that.
Right.
So, and The whole group was assembled in Boston, right? I mean, it wasn't like they had to choose from very far out.
I'm pretty sure all of them came from Boston. I know that the Knights, Jordan and John, they went to my school. That's
really?
the other story I was going to share with you. But the Donnie...
Wahlberg, yeah.
The Wahlberg, and was there another Wahlberg in it? Or
Mark was in it for a second. I think he was supposed to be in the group, and then
they're from Dorchester.
Yeah.
And I know Joey is from Jamaica Plain, but I'm not exactly sure where Jordan and John are from. But I know that they went to English High. They went to the Fenway program. I know John went to the Fenway program because one day I was sitting in class. And I didn't know about the New Kids on the Block. I'm more of a Zeppelin kind of.
Yeah.
And so I didn't know, but John came to school. And everybody was around. They leaped out of their chairs, and they all leapt into the hallway. The Fenway program was like a really small school within English High School. And everybody just knew him, and I was like, what's going on? And they're like, it's John Knight. I'm like, from?
Yeah.
New Kids on the Block. I'm like, it's a group. Yeah, I think I know Joey from back in the day.
Yeah, because by that point, the way that rock and roll was going, there was really no foreshadowing that a boy group like that with, almost like a Four Tops style setup with just microphones on the stage was gonna be popular.
Boy, did they make it.
And it, almost instantaneously they were everywhere.
Yeah.
So like the trading cards that inspired this conversation, made by Tops, which that's not a Boston company. It wasn't like there was locally crafted New Kids on the Block merchandise, that they put out. Why do you think this group from Boston was just immediately popular, hugely popular?
I think it was their personality. They all had amazing personalities. Like, if you look at them today, you can see it in their acting, because they're all gone into acting, almost all of them. And I think that their personality added to their learning, maybe the theater, their choreographed dancing together. I think all of that.
It does really go back to the geography of it too, because up and down the East Coast in particular, and I think about it a lot here in Portsmouth, and really through all the areas that have such a long history behind it. You have that authenticity that I mentioned before. You have that real genuineness, and that creates a society with a culture of that same kind of I've seen interviews with them even from when the 80s and 90s, and they have the accent. You don't hear in the music as much, but they definitely have the accent, and they joke around like guys from Boston would.
Exactly.
They're kind of giving each other a hard time about stuff, and they're so it's not as manufactured, even though they were manufactured in the same kind of light and by the same producer as New Edition, another Boston group. They had that good balance, I suppose, that could really only come from the East Coast, that could come from Boston in particular.
Their parents were involved.
Were they?
That was a pretty big part of it. Yeah, they'd be good because their parents were watching them.
They want to make sure that
That's
they...
a very Boston thing.
Yeah, it is. I mean, there's some, it wasn't like... Because I think of some other locations in the country which are a little bit more plastic, both actually and in just the way that, they kind of, LA comes to mind, just kind of very 20th century, and Las Vegas, or even Orlando, Florida, which I know is East Coast, but that's still another one that's just very much 1970s on is when it became a huge place. And I know that's where later boy bands like Backstreet Boys and NSYNC were kind of cobbled together from singers from all around the country and packaged into that place. Was the New Kids, they were all neighborhood kids. They were from Boston, and they kind of took that with them. And I think you're absolutely right about that. It matches up. That's why they had so much appeal. It's kind of like,
local kids.
Yeah, real guys. Thanks so much for doing this. I like these little conversations, and it's always fun to meet people. This is exactly what I was hoping for when I set up today, and I brought those cards. I'm like, there might be somebody that knew the new kids, and maybe even one of them are out wandering right now.
Yeah.
You could see, Donnie out there. All right, thanks again, and have a good rest of the time at the museum.
Okay.
Trading cards relating to warfare was not a new thing in 1991 when Topps produced its line of Desert Storm cards. There were some present during the Second World War, along with toys, board games, and such, that allowed for American kids to act out and play with the images from combat that they were seeing on newsreels. And, as you'll hear, while the re-emergence of such gung-ho attitudes towards warfare resumed in the early 1990s, as a collective reaction to the opposite feelings exuded during the Vietnam War, some war trading cards were manufactured during the early stages of what was to be a long conflict in Southeast Asia. Topps' battle cards featured illustrated scenes from World War II, some of them quite graphic, which make the Desert Storm cards from 1991 appear as just a series of clippings from back issues of Newsweek. Take a listen to how one such Desert Storm card can tell us so much about American society and culture in the early 1990s. All right, so I finally got somebody to pull from the bag of mystery, which is just a free backpack I got from Clear Advantage Vision. And it was none other than Peter of Loaded Question. And so, what is your role here at Loaded Question?
My official title is Everything But Brewer.
Everything else. So the operations of what we're doing right now is all you. So everybody give a round of applause for Pete, because none of this would happen without him, and that's also the reason I'm sitting here. And so thank you again for this opportunity. It's been fun, so much fun tonight.
Thank you for coming. We're happy to have you.
I'm glad I did. So you pulled from the bag what you thought was going to be a baseball card, but it turned out to be a Desert Storm card. And the one that you have is of the F-16 Eagle. And the way
which I know nothing about.
Right.
But,
And well, on the back, it probably tells you everything about it.
Oh, all right.
Which almost like a baseball card with all statistics, or when you get to learn that Rich Gedman was born on September 26th, it will tell you everything you need to know about that fighter from the war. And what's funny,
actually made by Topps too. Like
that's the question I was going to ask you about.
No kidding.
Is what was the maker's role or status in society? So this card was made somewhere around 1991, 1992, and in that time period, where was Topps? I mean, what a perfect name, right?
So I feel like in that time period, Topps was on top. I definitely collected basketball, football, baseball, all the cards, minus the Desert Storm cards. And when I first started collecting, Topps was what you were looking for. Like, that was the major brand. They were on top of that market, right. I guess. For lack of a better way of putting it.
How do you think they got that place where they felt comfortable enough by the early 1990s to make warfare cards, in addition to, because I also have, they made all the cards for movies, like Star Wars cards. Back in the 70s, they did that. They did E.T. when that came out. They did Dick Tracy. Every time there was a movie, they made the trading cards for it. But what does that say to you that they felt it necessary or even right to make cards based on a war? I mean, what does it even tell you about Desert Storm?
Maybe they just felt aggressive enough that they could do whatever they wanted. I don't know. If they saw a market that they could capitalize on, it looks like they got it. But I don't know. Maybe I'm being cynical right now.
No. I think that's it's consistent for the time period, because cards, as you mentioned, were huge. I mean,
Right.
I think I heard that they're coming back again. I've kind of asked, because I always tell a story in my teaching my classes when we teach about the 1920s and the stock market crash, because the warnings that a lot of people didn't heed back then, I got from my dad about baseball cards, because I would hold up the Beckett price guide and say, look, this Mike Greenwell rookie card is worth $5 and this Lawrence Taylor is worth $35. And he said, they're not worth anything unless somebody gives you money for it. Otherwise, they're just a piece of cardboard with a picture on it.
I have 725 Michael Jordan basketball cards in my closet right now.
And they're probably not worth...
I don't know. I haven't looked in a long time. But when I put them away, they were worth thousands.
Right.
And now probably worth...
And what is your
20s.
address and your... and when are you home? And
It's Portsmouth. My doors are unlocked. And, yeah.
So... and that's all, and I'm sure most of those came from the same time period where it was the culture of, especially, I'd say kids ages like 7 to 15 or so, 16, once you got a car and started dating your baseball cards.
And, started becoming attractive to other people, and you're
Right.
like, oh, wait, hold on a second. That's way
Enough
more
of these.
interesting, these pieces of paper.
Because they were getting expensive after a while. I remember the first, because that's the reason why the market started to bottom out, because for a long time, as evidenced here, they were making cards of everything. How many of those? I remember like the 1987 tops with the had the wooden border. They made every single player in the league, and so like if you had the complete set, you're talking like 1,000 cards.
Right. Yeah.
And so like the price guides would say, they would call these guys commons, worth 5 cents, and it was always just a guy like holding a bat or sitting on the bench, and no action shots because they didn't play ever. And then when the market started to go up and the kids were buying these cards and buying cards of war and everything else, they're like, hey, let's only make the star players. And I remember there was one line in particular called, I forget the name of the company, but they did a line called Studio. Do you remember the Studio cards?
Was that Upper Deck?
It might have been Upper Deck.
I feel like Upper Deck would have done that. I feel like they became that like higher.
Yeah, they were the upper. They were the upper deck, right? Even though in baseball ticketing, Upper Deck is like the cheapest seats, but like depending on where you are, or the bleachers, I guess they wouldn't call themselves the bleachers.
No, that's way too.
Because they were the first ones to have
polemic.
like that reflective.
Yeah, their logo was all like holographic, and then they made the holographic cards too.
Yeah, they were like nice and simple and like very sleek and chic looking, and like by the time they came out, Topps was still kind of you get the stain of the bubble gum in the back of the last card, and I don't know if bubble gum came in the top. I think that'd be going too far if the war cards had bubble gum
came
in
with
them
bubble
too.
gum. Yeah.
But going back
it probably came with like the dessert from the MRE.
Yeah, right. Like MRE. Yeah, the
meal ready to
made.
eat. Yeah.
Meals ready made or whatever. So I grew up in an Air Force family, and I remember vividly Desert Shield and Desert Storm because my dad was active duty at the time, but he was closing in on retirement. He actually, but I lived on the base, and a lot of my friends, their dads went overseas, and I always felt kind of weird with these cards. I remember seeing them for the first time, and like this one came from a package I bought just a couple years ago because I found it at a store or something. I'm like, I'm gonna just grab this and have it, but it always felt kind of dirty in a way, having cards representing weapons of war that killed people.
Did it have people too? Did it have like generals or
I
things
think
like
they
that?
had Norman Schwarzkopf.
Yeah.
I remember I had a T-shirt of Storm and Norman on it that I got at the base. On base, we had what was called the BX Base Exchange. It was like our store, and I won it in some kind of contest. And I guess what I'm saying is that war was like very merchandised. Like you could buy the yellow ribbon to put outside your house. And I think a lot of that was licking the wounds of Vietnam because of what the country did to those veterans, turning their backs on them. That it was like, okay, let's make up for it. But in true American cultural fashion, we made up for it and then kept going. and we're going to make T-shirts, we're going to make cards, we're going to make hats, we're going to make bumper stickers, we're going to sell the war. And I remember the night of when Baghdad was bombed, and my brother and I, I was like 10 years old, my brother's a little bit older, and we were like watching it on CNN. We were excited and like, yeah. And then I remember my mom was weeping. She was trying to make dinner and she was just crying. And my dad also was very serious. And we're like, what's the matter? And they're like, people are dying right now. This is serious stuff. And I just took the tone of this down, but by talking about it. But it was just like, we didn't see it that way because it was just another TV show.
Yeah, they try to make it super propaganda again, which is what happened. And so I was a history major too, so we can.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I think it became the ultimate propaganda show, but with the media that we had in the '90s, which is very different than what we had during World War II or during World War I or anything else. So it was, and definitely during Vietnam.
Yeah.
It was in this ultra propaganda show in the United States.
And likewise, I think a lot of it had to do with, once again, Vietnam changing the methods, because you're right, World War II, the media was heavily not only vetted, no pun intended, to try to make sure you weren't allowed the newsreels.
Yeah, the whole country was behind the war.
Right.
Yeah.
And then Vietnam, the opposite. And so I feel like by the 90s, when the CNN reporters are in the hotel in Baghdad and they're filming everything and they're embedded with the troops, they're trying to almost make up for what the previous generation didn't do.
I think so, yeah.
Because then by the time of the 2003 invasion, much different.
Very different.
It wouldn't even cross their mind in 2003 to make trading cards of Iraqi freedom.
I highly doubt it. Yeah, it seems like a horrible idea. But
what do you think is the reason why baseball cards and trading cards in general were so consistently popular in that era?
In our childhood era?
Like 80s, 90s. Because it really bottomed out by the end of that decade, but it was
I feel like our childhood era, we're close in age, I think, and I feel like our childhood era was the pinnacle, high point of trading cards. The trading cards of the past became super valuable.
Yeah.
And they existed for 50 years before us, right? I remember getting baseball cards from my uncle, who was he was a trader and a dealer back when things were very, very high when I was a kid. And he was like, here's all my commons from the 60s. And I'm like, what? Your commons from the 60s are worth $30 a piece. Yes, I'll take all of them. He's like, I don't really need them. I have the other ones. And I'm like, okay, cool. But yeah, no, it's super interesting that in that era it just kind of hit, and maybe it's that sweet spot between before social media and the internet was there, but it wasn't big yet, right? And we didn't really know what to do with it, so we needed this. And then it was after, I don't know what was before that, but I don't know, maybe we just needed something, and somebody sold it hard, and we all wanted it.
Yeah, because they saw the market for it. We were all, and there was definitely that component of get rich quick.
Yeah.
That the value to it for us was there from the beginning.
Right.
That we were under the impression, and I feel that kind of was in the ether in the 80s, greed is good, that buy low, sell high, even for little kids. I remember I saw Curtis Armstrong, the guy who played Booger in Revenge of the Nerds. I saw him give a talk years ago at the Brookline Booksmith, because he had a book out, and he was talking about his character in Risky Business, of how in that scene at the beginning of the movie when they're having their card game and they're going around the table and they're talking about, and this is early 80s Reagan era of everybody's gonna be rich, and they're just going around the table talking about how they're gonna get rich. They're high school kids and they're yeah, I'm just gonna do that, and that's no problem. And I feel like that kind of trickled down, no Reaganomics pun intended, to the younger kids who saw opportunity I remember having yard sales when I was a kid. I'm like, I'm gonna sell all my toys and get, and the baseball card thing and the trading cards in general came in as like immediately the price guide even looked like a stock ticker. It had the little arrows that would go up or down depending on how
whether
it was
it's going up or down.
And the wake up moment I had was Shaquille O'Neal's rookie season, because Upper Deck came out with that fantastic rookie card of him in like 3 stages of a dunk.
I had that card.
I think in one day I got like three of them, because I went to a card show and I sold some kind of card, and the guy traded me for my one card, like a Juan Gonzalez rookie card or something too, and I got like 3 packs of the Upper Deck basketball cards, and I think out of the 3 packs I got 2 of those, and I'm like, this can't be worth $45. Either I'm the luckiest kid in the world, or they just made a lot of these and just jacked up the price, the value, to get us excited about it. Almost identical to what they did with the stocks back in the 20s, where all the reporters and all the newspapers would like try to get the public. Well, GameStop, that happened 2 years ago with the GameStop stock, where they were
exactly the same.
like,
I mean, that actually is
getting
so parallel
people to
right
invest
there, right?
in it, and jack the price up and then bail out while people are still trading.
Well, they're
it.
still giving people money and figuring
It's pretty
it out.
wild. So it's pretty amazing how this one card of an F-16.
So I mean, the Shaq card if we can keep talking, is that okay?
Yeah.
So the Shaq card brings up like a specific memory for me. So like my best friend growing up, he was a Shaq fan, and I was a Michael Jordan fan through and through for like my entire life. And like I said earlier, like I have 725 Michael Jordan cards in my closet right now.
Oh my God.
And I was a kid who like early on was like trading back and forth to like have a valuable collection, all this other stuff. And then at some point it just clicked for me, and I was like, I don't care. What I want is Michael Jordan cards.
Right.
And so I started like over trading to get every card I could from every person I knew. And that included like card shops, that included my friends and everything else. I'd be like, I have all these other cards that I don't want at all. I will give you way above value on these cards for that card.
All the Michael Jordan.
So you tell me what you want.
Was it the value you were after, or was it because you appreciated Michael Jordan's?
I think it became this point of like I appreciated Michael Jordan, and like I was this ultra fan, and like I don't know if I just kind of clicked for me, but didn't click for me somewhere in the back of my head, where I was like, these things actually don't matter. But what matters to me is to have the biggest Michael Jordan collection I can have. And so I then made that my goal, because what was the point of having all these other like albums of other cards that don't really make it? Like I'm flipping through these pages and I was like, I don't care about this guy. I don't care about this guy. Oh, look, Michael Jordan. I want more of those.
Right.
And so I just started like weeding my collection out to get more and more Michael Jordan cards.
It's kind of funny how the Shaq card brings up that idea, because both literally as a player and also just the cards themselves, kind of figuratively, they represent like a crossroads of the game of NBA basketball, because Michael Jordan was finesse. Michael Jordan was incredible accuracy from all points of the court. Shaq was just brute force. Like I remember Shaq's rookie season, he broke like 3 backboards in a month.
Immediately,
and like not even intentionally. It was just like, ugh. And I love Shaq.
They had to redesign the backboard just for him. And it was almost like, I think Shaq as a person and Shaq as a player. He's a super entertainer.
He reminds me so much of like Babe Ruth, and like when he played for the Celtics, he actually lived in Sudbury, just like Babe Ruth did when he played for the Red Sox. I remember, because I read Shaq's autobiography a couple years ago, that was actually ghostwritten or co-written with a famous sports writer from who went to UNH. I forget her name right now, but and it's very good because he goes, through his entire career, but then gives his own like, doing it his way kind of thing. And he was the ultimate on and off the court, larger than life figure but also just like an all-around good guy. You know, like he
does seem like a really, really good human, which might be contradictory to Michael Jordan.
Right, because
he's got a very checkered past.
The persona that we got of Michael was, you know, I want to be like Mike, and they had the cartoon with his, you know.
But then he's this ultra asshole,
right? Not the nicest guy, and
people loved to play with him for the championships, but didn't love to play with him because he demanded the worst, like everything, and was a super big a-hole to get there, and yeah.
But he had that, and I remember allegations of ball hog. You know, some of his teammates would kind of mention that it was the Michael Jordan show. You know, he had to have the buzzer beater. He had to hold on to the ball too long. But man, those championship seasons with the Bulls, though, was just everywhere in the country people were watching the Bulls. Right. Just like everywhere in the country people were watching the Gulf War unfold. But it was the same time period because we were
that's a very unique parallel
on television.
Yeah.
And it wasn't the Bulls, but I remember it was the NBA Finals when the O.J. Simpson chase was happening. And as the night went on, you know, for a while they had the chase in a little screen and the game was on the big screen. And as the night went on,
and they would switch
sizes.
Yeah.
And for a while they were about the same size, and then as they got to the Simpson compound, the game was like this big, and you know.
I think that might have been the same night that I traded that Shaq rookie card away for a Michael Jordan card. And like I'm not joking. I was in my best friend's living room, and like we were watching the chase and watching the finals, or whatever game it was, and I remember like all right, we're kind of bored, but also not bored.
Right.
Let's bring out the cards, see what happens.
Right.
And I remember being like, "You want the Shaq card? I know you do." Yeah.
When we did our sports card tradings, it was like I felt like we were at a like Middle Eastern bazaar because we would all like pull out our wares and we would choose one of our friends' driveways and we would put out the cards that we were willing to trade for, and then we'd also display the ones that we would never trade.
Never. Yeah. They're in the back. They're just like they're eye candy. Like just look what I have.
You can admire, but
you can look at them, but don't touch.
You know, do not this way.
Don't look too long either. No. No, your eyes have been looking too long.
Roger Clemens' second season is going nowhere. You know, he's staying here, but this Wade Boggs might. You know, we'll see. But it would be a late morning, early afternoon thing, and you know, this is before, like you said, before the internet took over, and we had VHS obviously, but we also had parents who were like, get out of the house, you know. And even though baseball card trading isn't highly active, it was usually in between running through a sprinkler, going to Little League practice, or you know, doing, you know, looking for frog.
Shooting bottle rockets off in the backyard.
Just like crazy outdoor kids stuff.
Yeah.
And it was just part of like the routine. And I remember, I mean, the card shop gone. There's not a single one anymore. There used to be, every town had at least two.
Right.
And it was another routine thing that you would, you know, late in the afternoon, go get some, you know, money from mowing lawns and head to the card shop and buy a Michael Jordan, if you're you, or buy an F-16 Desert Storm card, if you're,
or an F-16 Desert Storm card.
That's such a wild thing. So I really appreciate you coming by and
you got it, Eric,
and talking about this stuff. And
this was super, super fun.
I hope you consider it a success.
I think so.
This is Season 2 of the EPS podcast. I hope you've enjoyed listening to what you've heard so far. Short episodes like this one, which are products of my EPS podcast live exhibits, will be coming out on Tuesdays this season, while longer episodes, deeper dives into subjects, are posted on Thursdays. If you like what you hear, consider becoming a patron by going to patreon.com/EPS podcast. Follow the show on social media, including YouTube and especially Instagram. I look forward to tuning in again to the EPS podcast, where everything is a primary source.